Okay, people, welcome back. And we're still on the objections answered. But it's chapter 7 now, the Universal Empire. Okay, people, without further ado. Chapter 7, objections answered, continued, the Universal Empire. Question: if Britain is Israel, why does she not govern the whole world, seeing that Israel was foretold to do so? There are many nations over whom England has no control. Answer: we do not understand from the scriptures that Israel was to govern all nations, but that she was to be chief, above and not beneath. She was to rule over many nations, but we are not aware of her having to rule over all. Besides this, obedience to God's laws was made the sine qua non of Israel's national prosperity. All those blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord. Deuteronomy. Isa. Our national temporal prosperity is consequently dependent upon our national obedience and recognition of God's laws, as the past experience of our country clearly proves. Obedience to papal, fallible laws, to the domination of priests, whether Roman or Anglican, or to the Church, is not obedience to God. As soon as England broke asunder the chains of her slavery to priestcraft and Roman Catholicism, she began to participate in the blessings promised to Israel. We now propose to introduce a few important witnesses and let our readers hear the evidence they have to give on the subject. During the Luther commemoration at Liverpool on November 1st, 1883, the Reverend Canon Taylor delivered an able and inspiriting lecture at which Dr. Hakes presided. In the course of his remarks, the latter made the following observations, which were applauded to the echo and adopted by the whole of the immense audience who filled the Hope Hall. He said, "It would be a shame to England if they did not always remember the Reformation, a great shame if they did not frequently remind the people of the great blessings they received by the means of the Reformation." Applause. It would certainly be a great shame if on such an occasion as this, the 400th anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther, they did not make it a special occasion for reviving the blessings God gave them at the time of the Reformation, which had preserved England in a wonderful manner and placed her above all nations, which had given them civil and religious liberty as no one else possessed, and had lifted the nation up morally above all the nations of the world. Applause. If they fell away from the Reformation, all those blessings they might depend on it would depart. Loud applause. Banner of Israel, December 26th, 1883. The remarkable alternations of prosperity and disaster which have signalized the history of the Jewish people during a period of 3,000 years under the theocracy, under the judges, and the dispersion, furnish a graphic illustration of the truth that while righteousness alone exalteth a nation, national sin is the sure precursor of national degradation and decay. Nor has the illustration of this fundamental truth been confined to the history of the Jews. The history of our own country presents a spectacle so perfectly analogous as to furnish the strongest reason for believing that as Judea was chosen for the special guardianship of the original revelation, so has England been chosen for the special guardianship of Christianity. The original revelation declared the one true God. Paganism was its corruption, by substituting many false gods for the true. The second revelation, Christianity, declared the one true mediator. Popery was its corruption, by substituting many false mediators for the true. Both paganism and popery adopted the same visible signs of corruption, the worship of images. Modern Avernus by Junius Jr., pages 8 and 9. Our own history since the Reformation attests on every page the operation of the providential system. Every reign in which the attempt was made to bring back popery, or even give it that share of power which could in any degree prejudice Protestantism, is marked by signal misfortune. It is a striking circumstance that almost every reign of this popish tendency has been followed by one purely Protestant, and as if to make the source of the national peril plain to all eyes, those alternate reigns have not offered a strong contrast in their principles and in their public fortunes. Let the rank of England be what it might under the Protestant sovereign, it always sank under the popish, let its loss of honour or of power be what it might under the Popish sovereign, it always recovered under Protestant, and more than recovered, was distinguished by sudden success, public renovation, and increased stability to the freedom and fortunes of the empire. The influences of popery is always, everywhere, and necessarily evil. In his England, Ireland and America, Mr. Cobden says, "We wish only to speak of the tendency which, judging from the facts are before us, this Church, the Roman Catholic, has to retard the secular prosperity of nations." In 1860, 10 years before the Franco-Prussian War, M. Edmund, about a Roman Catholic writer, wrote in the Opinion Nationale with reference to the Protestants of Alsace, "I had every reason to suppose that Protestants of Alsace, being rebels, trampled under the foot law of the empire, refused to pay taxes, evaded military service, set at naught morality, and pilfered other men's goods. For in point of fact, a sect which is destined to attain damnation would be very silly if it were to deny itself any possible enjoyment in this present world. But the things I have heard here completely astonish me. I have been assured by a Catholic policeman that the Emperor has no more devoted subjects than these cursed heretics. A Catholic officer swears to me that his best soldiers are Protestants. I learned from a Catholic tax gatherer that the Protestants not only pay their taxes regularly, but many make it a point of paying all their contributions for the year on the New Year's Day. A Catholic superintendent of woods and forests declares to me that in a canton of which 3/4 of the inhabitants are Protestants, 93% of the offences against the forest laws are committed by Catholics. I could not believe my ears. "But, gentlemen," I exclaimed, "with all the authority of the true faith, it is more certain that the Catholics are more enlightened than the Protestants, since their light comes from on high. Moreover, they must necessarily be more rich, because, as we know," they civilly answered me that I was altogether in error. "Because, as we know, Dio prodigue ses biens à ceux qui font voir d'être siens." They civilly answered me that I was altogether in error, that the heretic youth of this district was better educated than our own. The good Catholic priests of Alsace knew nothing more than how to say Mass and curse Protestants. They further told me that the Protestants are the best farmers, that their dwellings are the neatest and cleanest, that they are the best men of business and make fortunes more frequently than Catholics. Dean Alford, Dean of Canterbury, writing from Rome in letters from abroad, says, "Here we have the most absolute monarch in the world, ruling a capital by no means large, with a numerous staff of military and police, and besides, assisted by 20,000 French troops. And besides this, we have here a people whose state, physical, moral, and intellectual, is a result of accumulated centuries of a government and institutions, according to the advocates of the papacy, the best in the world, and administered by a fallible wisdom, unerring justice, spotless integrity, and unimpeachable truth. How then does it stand with Rome in point of security and good order? Unquestionably, in both these points, it is the worst city in the civilized world." Again he says, "It is not too much to say that the present moral and religious state of Rome is a foul blot on modern Christendom, and hardly to be paralleled even among the darkest passages in the history of our race." Cardinal John Henry Newman, the advocate of Roman Catholicism, in his Pope and the Revolution, Longmans, 1866, states, "Not that I would deny that there are sincere Catholics, so dissatisfied with things as they are in Italy, as they are in Rome, that they are brought to think that no social change can be for the worse." Lord Macaulay, in his History of England, Volume 1, page 47, says, "During the last 3 centuries, to stunt the growth of the human mind has been her chief object. Throughout Christendom, whatever advance has been made in knowledge, in freedom, in wealth, and in the arts of life has been in inverse proportion to her power. The loveliest and most fertile provinces of Europe have, under her rule, been sunk into poverty, and political servitude, and an intellectual torpor, while Protestant countries, once proverbial for sterility and barbarism, have been turned by skill and industry into gardens, and can boast of long list of heroes and statesmen, philosophers and poets. Whoever knowing what Italy and Scotland naturally are, and to what 400 years ago they actually were, shall now compare the country round Rome with the country round Edinburgh will be able to form some judgment as to the tendency of papal domination. The descent of Spain, once the first among monarchies to the lowest depths of degradation, the elevation of Holland, in spite of many natural disadvantages, to a position such as no commonwealth so shall has ever reached, teach the same lesson. Whoever passes in Germany from a Roman Catholic to a Protestant principality, in Switzerland from a Roman Catholic to a Protestant canton, in Ireland from a Roman Catholic to a Protestant country, finds that he has passed from a lower to a higher grade of civilization. On the other side of the Atlantic, the same law prevails. The Protestants of the United States have left far behind them the Roman Catholics of Mexico, Peru, and Brazil. The Roman Catholics of Lower Canada remain inert, while the whole continent round them is a ferment with Protestant activity and enterprise. Adam Smith, in his Wealth of Nations, Book 5, Chapter I.1, Part 3, Article 3 states, "The Church of Rome is the most formidable combination that ever was formed against the authority and security of civil government, as well as against the liberty, reason, and happiness of mankind." Pages 56. Dr. Manning, in his sermon preached before Dr. Wiseman, August 6, 1859, says, "England is the head of Protestantism, the centre of its movements, and the stronghold of its powers. Weakened in England, it is paralysed everywhere. Conquered in England, it is conquered throughout the world. Once overthrown here, all is but a warfare of detail. All the roads of the whole world meet in one point, and this point reached, the whole world lies open to the Church's will. And what is that will? Let the darkness of the time preceding the Reformation answer, and the condition of present papal states re-echo. Let the groans of the millions of dying martyrs at the stake repeat, and the cries of the tortured victims of the Inquisition declare that the will of Rome, as expressed in the encyclical letter of Pope Pius in 1864, and put into practice by the predecessors, is to condemn all who maintain the liberty of the press, or the liberty of conscience, of worship, or the liberty of speech, or the free reading of God's word, or that any other religion than the Roman Catholic religion may be established by a state." So people, that's the end of that chapter. Pretty anti-Catholic there, got there. It doesn't hold back really, but I suppose this book feels like it was written well before the days of internet and political correctness. Anyway people, that was good, and I will see you in the next chapter. Thanks very much for listening. Cheers.